She was a queen when she was just 6 days old, a widow before she was 19, and executed by her own cousin. This is a story of Mary, Queen of Scots, and it's a wild one, packed with power, passion, and brutal politics. But the question that still hangs over her story is, well, was she a traitor who tried to steal a crown, or was she just a tragic pawn in a brilliant conspiracy? Let's dig in. The whole thing really boils down to this: a single coded letter. This one letter became the so-called smoking gun, the piece of evidence that sent a queen to the executioner's block. But was it real? Was it a legit confession? Or was it actually the final, perfect piece of a frame-up that had been years in the making? To get why this was such a big deal, you gotta understand just how much of a threat Mary was. And this quote, it's from Sir Francis Walsingham, Queen Elizabeth's spymaster, and man, it says it all. To him, Mary wasn't just some political problem. No, she was a devilish woman, a mortal danger to his queen and to all of Protestant England. He was totally convinced that for Elizabeth to be safe, Mary had to go. Right, so with that mindset, the stage was set for one of the most incredible sting operations in history. And it all revolved around Mary's secret letters, a deadly correspondence that Walsingham didn't just want to read, he wanted to control it. Now, you might be asking, why would Mary even risk writing these letters? Well, to get that, you have to imagine the sheer desperation of her situation. She'd been a prisoner in England for 19 years. 19! Just think about that. Nearly 2 decades shuffled from one castle to another, a queen in a gilded cage. It was a life sentence in all but name. Okay, so how did she even get here? A queen of Scotland, a prisoner in England? To figure that out, we've got to rewind a bit and look at exactly why Mary was such a huge threat to her cousin, Queen Elizabeth. Mary's life started at the absolute top. She became Queen of Scotland when she was literally less than a week old. Then she's raised in the super powerful French court, and for a while she's Queen of France too. So she's a queen in her own right with a royal pedigree that some people thought was even stronger than Elizabeth's. And this, right here, is the real kicker. See, Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, had at one point declared Elizabeth illegitimate. So for a whole lot of Catholics in Europe, that meant Mary, his grandniece, was the true heir to the English throne. This wasn't just some family drama. It was a religious and political time bomb. Mary's very existence was a challenge to Elizabeth's right to rule. So, with claims to 2 thrones and all this power, how did she end up a prisoner? Well, her downfall didn't happen in England or France. It happened in her own chaotic kingdom of Scotland. It was just one disaster after another. Mary, a devout Catholic, comes back to rule a Scotland that had just turned Protestant. Her reign was a total mess, a terrible marriage, the brutal murder of her secretary right in front of her, her husband's own mysterious death, and then a catastrophic marriage to the guy everyone thought did it. In the end, she was forced to give up her throne and fled to England, hoping her cousin Elizabeth would help her. She didn't get help. She got a prison cell. And that brings us right back to our spy story. After almost 20 years of Mary being locked up, Walsingham decides it's time to solve the Mary problem for good. And he doesn't just sit around waiting for a plot to happen. Oh no, he helps create one. A perfect trap designed to catch a desperate queen. And this is how he did it. It was honestly genius. Walsingham's team set up a secret way for Mary to get letters, smuggling them in and out through the cork of a beer barrel. Mary thought she had a secure line to her supporters. What she didn't know was that every single letter, in and out, was being intercepted, opened, copied, decoded, and then resealed before it ever reached its destination. She thought she was plotting in secret, but Walsingham was reading over her shoulder the whole time. The key to all this secrecy was a nomenclator cipher. Now, this wasn't your basic schoolyard secret code. It used a whole codebook of symbols for common words and names, making it super hard to crack. But Walsingham had an ace up his sleeve, the best codebreaker in England, a guy named Thomas Philippes. And for Philippes, this was just a fun puzzle to solve. And pretty soon, snap, the trap was baited. A young Catholic guy, Anthony Babington, writes to Mary using the beer barrel channel. He lays out this whole plan to free her, start a rebellion, and, crucially, to assassinate Queen Elizabeth, what he calls the tragical execution. This was the moment Walsingham was waiting for. And then Mary replied. According to the version that Philippes decoded, she gave her blessing. She apparently signed off on the plan to kill Elizabeth. And that one phrase, that was her death warrant. With that letter, Walsingham finally had what he needed to charge her with high treason. But Walsingham wasn't done. In a move that was just incredibly bold, his codebreaker Philippus added a little something extra to Mary's letter, a forged postscript written in her perfect cipher. It asked Babington to name all of his co-conspirators. See, this wasn't just about convicting Mary anymore. It was about taking down her entire support network. So, with the letters in hand and the plotters rounded up, the final act could begin. Mary, Queen of Scots, was put on trial for treason against a queen she didn't recognize in a country where she was supposedly a guest. Let's be real here. By any standard, then or now, this trial was a complete sham. Mary had no lawyer. She wasn't allowed to see the evidence against her, not even the letters themselves. She couldn't call any witnesses. The guys who accused her were also her judges. This wasn't about finding the truth. It was about getting the verdicts they wanted from the start. But even in this impossible situation, Mary fought for herself. She argued, pretty reasonably, that as a sovereign queen, an English court had no right to try her. She swore she never approved Elizabeth's murder and said the letters had to be forgeries. She demanded to see the originals, a request that was, of course, denied. But really, the outcome was never in doubt. The English lords found her guilty. Queen Elizabeth hesitated for a few weeks, but in the end, she signed the death warrant. On a cold morning in February 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed. So you'd think that's the end of the story, right? Elizabeth won, her rival is gone, case closed. But history had one last amazing twist up its sleeve. And here it is, the ultimate irony. Just 16 years later, Queen Elizabeth, the famous Virgin Queen, died with no children to inherit her throne. So who was her closest relative with a solid claim? Yup, it was James, Mary's son. The son of the woman Elizabeth had executed to protect her throne became King James I of England, finally uniting the two crowns. Mary lost her life, but in the end, her son won the kingdom. By all accounts, Mary faced her execution with incredible calm and resolve. She walked to the block seeing herself not as a traitor, but as a martyr for her Catholic faith. And her very last words were a simple prayer. Okay, so let's just quickly recap the big takeaways here. First, Mary's claim to the English throne was the core issue that drove this entire rivalry. Second, she was taken down by a seriously clever spy operation that really blurred the line between catching a criminal and setting someone up. Third, we still debate whether the evidence against her was legit. And finally, the incredible irony. Her death is what ultimately allowed her son to take the throne. Which brings us all the way back to where we started. Was Mary a guilty conspirator who really did plot to kill her cousin? Was she a desperate, tragic figure who was just completely outplayed by a master spy? Or in the cold, hard world of 16th century politics, was she a threat that for the good of the state simply had to be removed? History still hasn't decided. What do you think? Thanks for watching.